What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
Would you say Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
Hey, what's up, Rebels? Welcome back to Rebel Radio. I'm your host, Josh Levine. With me today in the studio is my man, Mike Walbert, director of the A3C Festival out of Atlanta. A3C, if you're not familiar, is an important part of hip-hop culture. It's a conference plus music festival. It's business and lifestyle. It's a big event for the market of Atlanta and for hip-hop overall. It's been called hip-hop's family reunion, and it's sort of patterned after South by Southwest as far as being both business and lifestyle. Mike's got some great lessons from his journey as an entrepreneur through this business. Mike's gonna tell us about his journey as an entrepreneur getting into that business. He's got some great lessons about the tools they use to keep their marketing tight. As you can imagine, pulling off an event of that magnitude requires a really big team effort, a lot of coordination, and so having all that really organized is important for them. And he's gonna tell us how he's learned to do his homework before jumping into a new business, some lessons they learned the hard way. And right now, let's hear our interview with Mike Walbert. So cool. Well, I appreciate you coming to do this. I've been a fan of A3C from afar. I've never been.
Yeah.
But I always hear great things about it.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah.
I've heard it called Hip Hop's family reunion.
Yeah.
I kind of get that there's a real community to it.
Right,
So I want to dig
sure.
into what that is and how you got to all this. So,
Cool, man.
But I always like to start at the beginning. And so for a guy that now works in the music business, how did you first? Were you always into music? I know you said it wasn't your first career, but were you always into it as a fan?
Yeah, for sure. Like growing up in Atlanta, like you're kind of a part of this this movement at the time, right? I mean, like you see the artists that you like kind of go from like local heroes to like on the radio and then like global stars, which was cool. Yeah. And that first kind of falling in love was definitely with Outkast. Like that was regionally when I fell in love, because before that, I was listening to music from New York and LA. Yeah. But and then some, booty shake bass music was like Atlanta, like that was what I was into. And then
so what's the first song that you remember, like, this is my music?
Man, it was probably 69 Boys, like, of the bass era. Yeah. Like that was like 6th grade for me. Uh-huh. And I'd gone from listening to like Offspring or like rock music and whatever I could get my hands on as a kid. Like this is before streaming music. This is before, it's like, sure. So I have two older brothers and radio. Like that's my musical influence. And then, obviously like MC Hammer, just like the stuff that you can hear, like kind of like, oh, this is dope. But then like right when like we had like Friday night skating. So we'd go to the skating rink and then whatever the DJ was playing was kind of what you get into. Right. And it really got into like that kind of like bass all-star music where it was just like real crunk. And then really quickly after that, I was like Outkast dropped like Skewing on the Bar. Like just, these type of songs. Like that was like just hit after hit after hit. And then it became the anthem. Like you just put their album on and just ride.
It's funny. So like, I was like, I grew up with hip hop and I remember hearing Southern Playalistic for the first time and just like, realizing that we were on the brink of something different. Like, I wouldn't say I knew how it was going to unfold or whatever. Yeah. But just hearing that song, especially, that was just like, this is so different. Yeah. To what else is happening right now, and it's so good.
Yeah, I guess I didn't have I was so young, I didn't really have this kind of global perspective, but definitely like even looking back and like kind of looking at the history, like just how Atlanta like kind of infused all this like funk, soul, jazz, and turned it into like this new kind of brand of hip hop. like that's I think and honestly, like I say, like we kind of everyone has followed in that footsteps. I think since then, like I really think that like without those guys, I don't think that we have Atlanta the way it is. Even with DeBrad and Crisscross and what So Def was doing, like I don't think that it would have the meter would have kept going.
Yeah,
I think it would have been like kind of like a blip.
Yeah, because those those guys they created a sound, and like the Brad and Crisscross, like those didn't really have a place to them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah,
but Outkast did
for sure.
And I think I mean what I find interesting is that Atlanta, how it's how long that's sustained and how it's grown, and now now Atlanta's like this epicenter again or still.
And I think there's probably like so many factors involved. Like I count, like I think about it a lot, and I think there's so much perfect storm that happened. Like there was this mass transit back to the South from like, from all over, but even just little things like the Olympics, Delta Airport, like all these things, like I look at all these little factors that I think played a role. Even Katrina, like brought in a ton of new talent, like all these things that kind of help keep stirring and like I think bringing in new flavors, new energy to the music. But then also like the living, like we got green spaces, we got like soul food, like like it's all these things I think add to the music and let people kind of be creative and like make funky music, man.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, but you didn't get into the music business.
Yeah. So I've always been like interested in just business, like and being creative on the business side. So, I actually was a radio DJ in college at USC out in LA, and like I'm not even gonna say that was my first foray into music because that was just fun. Like I was just kind of kicking it. I didn't take it very seriously.
What kind of stuff? You were playing a hip hop show?
Yeah, like an hour hip hop show. I was like,
were you DJing before you got to college?
No, and again, like I wasn't like cutting records, right? Yeah, just playing records, like just like literally, like me and my friends would just come in and like play records, like for like KSCR, right? So super fun. I was like, probably like a 3 a.m. slot, right? Like,
but did people notice you? Like,
yeah, I mean, like so I got the show because a good buddy of mine who still lives out here had a show, so I was like co-DJing with him, and then he was like. Became the programmer and was like, hey, you can have your own show if you want. So we kind of had like back-to-back slots. So we would just kick it for like a whole night.
Right.
So he'd start playing at like 10 and we'd probably get out of there around like, 1 a.m., like 2 a.m., something like that. But it actually, it got me into like being more of like deeper dive into hip hop and like looking for records and like, we do interviews on shows. So we get hit up, artists and like, I remember like just hitting up, trying to reach out to artists, looking at the back of CDs and finding the info and like, and then being like, yo, we'd love to, and you're like a college radio. And so artists.
In a big market.
Yeah, in a big market at USC in LA. And it's like, oh, for sure. Like, we'll definitely, we'll call us at this time that works. So we had fun, like kind of seeing who we can get on the radio and stuff.
That's huge. I know for me, I started out at the college paper as a critic.
Yeah.
And at UCLA and it didn't really occur to me that anybody would read my stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then like I'd run into people on campus that were like, yo, I've read that thing you wrote. Or really what they said was, I remember someone saying like, I saw you in the paper and like you looked mad. Kind of like a black hoodie, and I was like, I just always look mad.
That's my resting face.
Yeah, kind of. And so, but for me, it was this moment of like, oh, there's actually somebody on the other side of this.
Yeah,
that was really interesting.
Yeah, I guess I did. And even at that point, I wasn't even, because yes, we had some listeners and we knew that we were kind of reaching a larger outside of USC too, although we were kind of targeting kids. So. For me, that was just fun, and I didn't get into it. So entrepreneurship was my major, and I came back to Atlanta and was just like, I had started a couple small businesses. So like my friends kind of knew me as like, we got an idea. Let's hit up Mike.
What was your first business?
Hot sauce.
Nuh-uh.
Hot Atlanta hot sauce.
Like you created a hot sauce brand?
Yeah. So when I came back, I was a brand director of a snack foods company. And after like 9 months, I left. So literally had lunch, and over lunch, like decided to start a business with my buddy, and it was hot sauce. We were just like, why is there not an Atlanta hot sauce? Like there's Texas Pete, there's New Orleans, Louisiana hot sauce. Like Georgia has definitive like products like peaches and Vidalia onions. Like let's use that to start a hot sauce. And really quickly like got like 50 accounts in Atlanta because everyone's like, oh dope, like
I'm sure
you like know this is awesome. Like Hot Atlanta hot sauce, like that brand at the time, like it was kind of a no brainer.
It's a good brand.
Yeah, and
how'd it go?
It went well. Like, I learned like lessons on like partnership and starting a relationship with your friends and stuff.
Yeah.
So I ended
what did you learn that like
it's a marriage,
that
man.
you carried with you into the next thing?
So I think just being in line with your partners, like having the same goal and mission. I think really quickly we butted heads in the sense that he wanted to launch like 3 or 4 new lines like really quickly. And I wanted to kind of develop this core product. And I was like, listen, we are not in grocery stores yet. We don't have like a distribution chain. Like, and he wanted to kind of grow and expand all these new products. And I was like, we're just not ready. And honestly, we couldn't get over that hurdle. Like, because I was like, let's focus on this. Yeah. And he wanted to focus on that. And we had a third partner who was our chef, but also it became kind of toxic, right? So,
I think that's really hard. We hear that.
Yeah.
We hear that story over and over. Just, how you align multiple people's values and ideas and energy is really, really tough.
And I think finding like, and again, like this is the type of stuff where it's frustrating because you can hear it 100 times, but until you make the mistake, like you're like, oh, that's what everyone has been telling me.
Right.
And it's also like find partners that, match your work ethic. So if someone doesn't work as hard as you are, it's going to frustrate the hell out of you.
For sure.
And then 2, find someone that fulfills your, like, know your strengths and weaknesses, and find someone that complements you well. If you're both really creative, but people, no one's doing the books or no one's like focused on X, Y, and Z, then it's not going to work. You guys are both creatives. You need to work with someone else.
Yeah, I passed up once on a partnership because the guy was like, I was like, you're too much like me.
Yeah.
Like we're both good and bad at the same thing, so we cancel each other out. And
I honestly, that forced, like, a lot of people don't do that, right? Most people are like, oh, we vibe so much. We see eye to eye. Yeah. This is gonna be awesome, and then they're like, oh wow, I just started a business like with myself. And then I got in a couple other random things, and then 2 of my buddies not long after, I was still doing hot sauce at the time actually. And
so did you sell that business? Or
back to him, and then I'm a silent partner now. So it was kind of like we left on good terms. It was just like, hey man, like this isn't, why don't you go ahead and do that? Yeah. So,
and how's Hot Atlanta?
It's just kind of stabilized. Yeah, like it. He does other things full time, and it's basically just like has the same accounts, doesn't grow, doesn't die, and just no one's really kind of trying to grow it. So it is what it is. Yeah. And a shame because I think it's something that, if the right person behind it, definitely could. And actually, we even had some people interested in like trying to do some stuff with it. And my advice to them was, don't. Let it be. Yeah. But so 2 buddies that were in music producers basically came out to me, and friends of mine from high school, good friends, and basically said, we want to start a music production company. Would you help us out? It went from like 10% of my time, so I'd spend like 1 day a week on it. And then like 2 months later, 3 months later, I ended up doing, like I was spending 2-3 days a week on it. And then like, I was like, after a while, I was like, oh wow, I'm really like, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. It was kind of like not even like a planned kind of process. It was just like, I'm spending a lot of my time doing this.
And that's like signing artists and all that?
Yeah, so we started like really quickly was like, so we grew into like managing artists, doing consulting work for other up and coming artists, like brand development, events, like that was it, man. I just really fell in love really quickly with like the Atlanta scene. And we were doing like monthly events. We were doing, releasing mixtapes. Like we released like 6 to 8 projects a year, like
Nice.
with different artists, solo projects, compilations. We were producing for other albums, so it was busy, man. But really quickly, I think, like we got to a place like almost like grew rapidly, right, and had a really good name. And then I was like, okay, now I feel like what do I do?
Yeah.
Like in music, right? When you like reach this kind of level of independence, and then I start being like, okay, what is the next step in music, right? Like that was tough figuring out like what do we do next. And then
So what'd you do?
so I had met A3C, the director of A3C, through my partner at SMK, and that kind of launched my excitement into this bigger conference and event space. And I've told the story before, but we took through SMK was doing a showcase at South by Southwest, and we were just showcasing artists from Atlanta. We put the A in Austin. I did it with a good friend of mine, Fadia Cater, at the time, and we had 2 15-passenger vans, did the whole thing, like U-Haul behind it, and we're just amped. We're like, yo, we're gonna put on for the city. And I remember just being like, after the show, like, and it was even like an artist came up to me and was like, now what do I do? And I remember just thinking like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, we just drove 16 hours across country to Austin, Texas for a hip hop showcase.
Yeah.
And look around and like, it's college kids, it's techies, it's film folks. And
What
it's
year
like
is that?
2008, 2009.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, hip hop's a much bigger piece now. And
Yeah. I remember I was at South by 2005.
yeah.
And we were doing some stuff there with Cyan. I forget what we had.
Yeah.
But some big parties.
Yeah.
And then my buddy, who's the A&R guy, was in town just for something else. Like, I remember he calls me, and I'm at a show watching like 3 white guys in suits play guitars, like in the black suits with the skinnies on. And I had no interest in whatever that was. And he calls me, he's like, let's go see Slim Thug. And I was like, yes.
I'll be there.
So
at
we
5.
drive like a half hour.
Oh, shit.
So far from, like it was this thing that had no idea that South by Southwest was going on. And we get there, and me and him are the only white guys, and there's like 1,000 people, and there's like, we pull up, and there's like 5 fights happening in the parking lot. And I was like, this is my shit. Like, I would much rather be here. It was so good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes and no.
But
yeah. I know. Yeah. I could do without the fights.
Yeah, of course.
I've been in too many shows with fights. But that's funny, man. Like, so I think even like 90% of the shows at South by Southwest that are hip hop now are not official.
Right.
Hip hop is just like,
Sure.
we're taking this thing over.
Yeah.
But it was the drive back, man. After that, I was just like, I drove back from that, and I was just like, why isn't there something like this for hip hop? And like, it was just like, oh, we live in Atlanta. Like, oh, I know artists, and like, we can do this. And like, 3 months later, I met Brian Knott, who's the founder of A3C, and just that started it, man. That was the spark. It was just like a combination of a series of events. It just felt like, oh, he's got this showcase event that has been around for a while. It was still like 3 days and like 60 artists over 3 days. So it was really like a showcase for some like regional talent, but it had like a good reputation in the kind of the backpack scene and like in old school heads. And I was just like, man, like let's start building this. Like let's start bringing in the talent, like making this like the South by for hip hop. So that was like the sequence of events that kind of led to even now, really. And man, we figure out so much every year, but that was the birth, yeah.
How many years is it now?
So he started it in 2005. I got involved in 2009. So this will be the 13th year that A3C's been around.
That's amazing.
But
it's it's interesting you call it the South by for hip hop, because I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it makes sense, right? So it's festival, conference,
and shows and events and pop-ups and artist lounges, and that's the thing. I think, in the end of the day, I think why South by Southwest wins, and what I think like the kind of bare bones of it is like, okay, during the day you're gonna get some work done. You're gonna network. You're gonna build and create. But then you're gonna have a party. Like then you're gonna go out and drink or see some great artists. Like that's essentially kind of what we're trying to do, right? Like we want people to come in town, network and learn and create content. And the conference starts Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then the festival grounds is Saturday and Sunday. So it's kind of like the parties during the week. But I think we had like 75 shows over 5 days.
Nice.
Like we're hovering around every year around 1,000 artists. So
how difficult is that? I mean, we were talking earlier about just the nature of hip hop and disorganization.
Yeah.
But also, like law enforcement and permits and insurance and all that stuff. Like, it's easier to get a rock show insured than a hip hop show. Like,
they're both tough,
especially in
but
the South, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it's one, like, knock on wood, we've had 13 years of a safe event. Like we keep all of that stuff really seriously, because again, if we're not throwing a safe event, if we're not throwing like an event that's produced well, then we're not going to be around very long. So even though we make mistakes every year, we're not afraid to say, like, we try to learn from those.
Mm-hmm.
So as we grew kind of rapidly between 2011, 2013, and then 14, like, we learned a lot. Like, our first outdoor event was in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Like, permitting, city, police officers, and, like, lost money, lost a bunch of money on that and learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like, there's so many costs that we didn't even, like, porta potties and fences and permitting and health and all these things were like, oh, wow, like 24-hour security for stage and generator, all these things were like, oh, wow, like didn't think of all that. So, like, dude, like, we're, we didn't have the background in that. So we have 5 years of just, like, learning on the fly, right? Like, well, 13 years, but really, like, in the last 5 or 6 years, like, every year I'm just trying to learn as much as I can about what we're doing. That's trying to go to more events and learn from them too. But
so is there a point? I mean, I love that spirit of just like, I always say, like, if I knew how hard it was going to be to do what I've accomplished, I probably wouldn't have tried.
Right.
Right. And so I love that spirit of, like, let's just do it and we'll figure it out. But was that, like, deliberate? I mean, obviously you're not like, oh, let's just not think about what it's going to
No.
Of course. But the willingness, like, what's my question? What is it inside you that makes taking that type of leap okay?
I think it goes back to my, like, what I even went to school for, which is entrepreneurship. Like, I don't really know if I have another path. Like, I don't see myself working for, like, a corporation or like this. So, like, I love not necessarily the risk of it, but I love the creativity of it. Mm-hmm. I love trying to create experiences for people that are meaningful. And I love what the brand stands for, man. I really feel strongly about what we do and its impact on the culture and the community. Like, every year, I think, like, the non-tangibles are just by far better than anything else. Like, the phone calls I get, the emails we get, and now more and more trying to do more of that follow-up afterwards. It's like calling people and how to go and learn as much. And, like, we're, like, people are really, like, getting a lot of value. Like, people are meeting people are connecting, people are having these experiences, and not things that we even program. Like, yo, I went here and then I went to the studio and I saw this guy, and, like, it's just the things that happen when you put all this stuff together. Yeah. That aren't even on the bill, that aren't even on the schedule, that just happen. I think that's kind of the magic that we've kind of created, is, like, when you bring all these creatives together, you bring all these, like, passionate people and, like, people that all believe in, like, this culture that I think we're a part of. Like, really magical stuff happens that way when you do that.
So part of what I love about that, first of all, I think for music, but especially hip hop, the events are the heart of the culture. And,
it's rubber meets the road, man.
Yeah. And it got, I mean, if we really think about hip hop culture, right, like, that's the roots was, whether it was the park jams in the Bronx. Yeah. Or, the downtown shows, right? Like, you know, hip hop.
House parties, man. Yeah.
Yeah, right? Or the house parties, you know, like, but even hip hop, you know, in historical terms, hip hop culture was around for about, you know, 6 or 8 years before anyone ever made a record, right? And before that, it was just all events. So I really think there's something special about that. And I also think, you know, then, like, it's also the area of music that hasn't done well with concerts and touring and festivals and all that shit, like compared to raves or rock shows or whatever, right? Like, so I think that's just a really interesting you guys are doing culturally, but then also that you add the business to it, that, you know, the music business is so hard for artists.
Yeah.
And, you know, partly because it's just a messed up business, but also partly because you don't become an artist because you want to do the music business.
Right.
You become an artist because you want to make music, and then it's all the other stuff that messes you up.
And nowadays you have to have a degree in marketing and technology, and like being an artist is like mastering these marketing platforms. Hopefully. Yeah, like knowing how to manage your money. And the great thing now is that there's tools out there to help artists. And like that's one of the things that we really want to bring to them is like, did you know about this app? And do you know about these tools? And here's like the biggest pitfalls that artists get into. And I think that's like something I've adopted lately is like an educated creative community can be an economic driver for a city and a culture. An uneducated creative community is a danger to themselves.
Sure.
Like you are ripe for scam and fraud, and you are ripe for people taking advantage of you, and you know, just not knowing your rights, and it's really like it's a bad path. Like you can be super creative, and if you don't know the other side of the business, then you're going to be taken advantage of. But if you're super creative and you have the right tools, then you're going to bring like that's the biggest driver in real estate and even in cities is like no one cares if you like, you know, have a great like I don't know, B2B tech sector, like like it's about like, oh, how cool is your city? Like are you know, what are you creating that's fun and exciting? Like that's it, man. Like so
how much does the city of Atlanta get that, or how
they do that? Man. So we've partnered with the city closely, I think. And it's funny, man, because Atlanta has an interesting relationship with hip hop that you might expect. It's like, how much do we want to embrace this culture, right? Like it's tough because I think on its face, I think a lot of people don't know how to separate some things in hip hop, like the culture and then the violence or drug culture or these other things that have elements in the hip hop community, but really don't define the hip hop community and have nothing to do with.
I mean, those are part of culture more broadly, society more broadly, and youth culture specifically.
Sure.
No matter what the genre.
Sure, but I think are probably overrepresented in hip hop. So it's tough for the city, and I get it, but I think they know what they've got. Like hip hop is the biggest export out of Atlanta. It is the reason we are one of the most culturally relevant cities in the world. It's music, it's hip hop. Like I think it's just tough. And again, I separate the city sometimes because the city is representatives. But what happens outside of the Capitol office, that's what the city is. It's you know, so like it's all the studios and creatives and new labels and you know all these wonderful people that are coming up and like making the city what it is. That's what I'm more focused on. It's not necessarily like my city council members. It's more like these amazing artists and like labels that are starting up and just dope people that we're trying to support and make sure they have like the resources they have and work with them. It's important for us. Like we try to work with as many people as we can, from like the High Museum to the ballet to the, you know, to like, you know, just an up and coming hip hop artist or a studio. Like we really try to make sure that we're playing an important role in Atlanta, which is connecting the arts community and connecting the tech sector to the hip hop community. Like that is a role that we want to play and be in the forefront of.
Yeah, that's cool. How do you, you know, obviously Atlanta's a pretty big market, but, you know, there's a big world out there.
Sure.
beyond that, and there's global interest in this culture.
Yeah.
So how do you address that? How are you using, social networks and content to, are you conscious about the impact that you're making outside of Atlanta?
For sure. I think it goes back to our programming. So of the 100 events that happened during A3C, we produce like 5 of them.
Oh, wow.
So we are proactively reaching out to influencers, promoters, brands, labels that have different geographic regions, different vibes and all these things, age groups, everything. So we're trying to put together a patchwork of things that happen at A3C and bring that into Atlanta so that it attracts everyone else that can see other things. So example is like last year we had 2 Canadian showcases, a UK showcase, a South African showcase. We were trying to get a South Korean showcase. So we'd have international showcases, but then we bring in curators from the West Coast and all on the East Coast, Midwest, Miami. Like we have, and that was really like the second thing I did when I got here after, because I just got back from South by Southwest, was like, we need to stop programming this and we need to start empowering other people and being, helping them as much as they can in terms of programming a show.
Yeah.
Like, here's the venue. We're going to help produce it. I'll provide a stage manager, all these things. Like, that was the first thing I did. And ever since then, we get probably around 1,000 showcase submissions a year.
Was there a moment when, you'd started in this business, because presumably you're taking a risk, going into a business that you didn't know and high risk, as you said, you could lose a lot of money. And was there a moment when you knew that this was the right business for you?
Yeah, well, I remember the moment I was like 2013, maybe going into 14. I'm so bad at time.
Yeah,
you got those.
right.
Like literally, I'm so bad at this. But I think it was like going into 2014, so after 2013. And we had just done our first outdoor event. We had just kind of had our first conference kind of at the Malia Hotel. So there were a lot of firsts. And I was still doing it part-time. I was managing Jaron Benton, who was just an XXL artist on the freshman cover and was going on like world tours, just signed a Funk Volume. We were kind of getting placements, like, things were just like across the board. We're like, and I was still consulting for some other people. And I was like, man, I'm burnt out. And also I started like mismanaging, right? Like having trouble to like manage my time. And
Sure.
so I really kind of like took a step back in like December 2013. It was just like, what am I going to do different next year? Like, one, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. Like, I can't successfully manage an artist, this festival, SMK, and everything else I want to do. So, like, what's my next move? And I'd always been, like, that hustler mentality of, like, like juggling things. Yeah, like, oh, yeah, like, let's definitely do this. And so I think learning how to say no, but also, like, I definitely, for the first of my life, I just threw myself in. And I was like, I think A3C has a tremendous possibility, but not if no one works here. So, like, there's got to be someone that works here.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first person. I had to convince the partners. At that time, I think I was probably a very minority, like, had earned a couple equity points. But, like, I was like, guys, let's really do this.
Yeah.
I'm willing to, like, go all in and get office space and build out, like, a team and do this. And they kind of, like, just, like, we're all in, let's go. And I think it was just that moment of just like what, like that I think had the biggest opportunity and cultural impact and business opportunities.
So in hindsight, put yourself in your partner's shoes.
Yeah.
Why were you the right one for that job?
At that point I had probably been, I'd been in the captain's chair for a couple of years. So they had seen me take it from a few thousand people and a few hundred performers to 10,000 people and 500 performers and at that point there was a lot of excitement around the business. Like we had a couple years when I first started, years of just doubling in size. So we were doubling year over year. You know, like I had proven myself.
Sure.
And just I worked hard. Like, you know, like the guys knew me, and like we still to this day have a great working relationship. Like just a lot of mutual respect, and have, you know, 5 or 6 new people on the team now, but continue to have a good working relationship and pretty much agree on what we want to do.
So how does, you know, doubling every year is tough in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know, you're adding people, you're coping with success.
Yeah.
Right. Profit doesn't necessarily double at the same rate.
Sure.
Like all that stuff, right? Like, you know, I get that, but it's also hella fun.
Yeah.
Right. When things are just growing fast and you're, you know, trying to keep up with it. You're like jets, you know, water skiing, right?
Oh yeah.
Trying to hang on to it. Like it's so, you know, it's fun, and difficult at the same time. But then, you know, it's also not sustainable.
Right.
Right. And I don't want to speak for your business, but I assume it's not going to double every year forever.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm,
you're going to become Google.
Yeah.
But like, so then how do you handle when that growth slows down, which isn't necessarily, I think, a bad thing, but it can feel like it when you're in it?
I think it's just being really confident with where you want to go. Yeah. I think I think our biggest problem. So when we were growing so fast, and there were so many opportunities coming our way, we tried to do too much. Like we definitely tried to do too much.
What's an example of that?
So we try to launch all these like experiences under A3C, like A3C Style, A3C Film, A3C. Those are the 2 big ones. Okay. But had like, we had separated even education and music and film and style, and we wanted to be like the hip hop version of Sundance and the hip hop version of Magic, and we were just like really feeling ourselves, but then really like those. There already are though, like, you know, like,
right.
And but also know your audience. Like we were trying to grow these new sectors so quickly, and we're still taking care of our core people. We're always like, listen, our base is artists. Let's focus on that while we build this other stuff. But we were kind of losing probably experience on what our core audience was, and I think at the end of the day, we have circled back to being like, let's just continue to build experiences for the music ecosystem, and through that can touch creatives and video directors and all these people. But like, let's have the kind of defining factor be the music creator, and then all the people that they touch. So music tech and music, you know, if there's like clothes, it should be an artist's clothes. You know, like it should have representation of like, or how brands and artists connect and that mutual relationship, and like talk about it through the lens of the music industry. And that should kind of be our core defining factor, because like we realized pretty quick that we were not a defining voice in style. We were not a defining voice in like film.
Sure.
So people weren't really checking for us at that. And I think we were kind of like, didn't have the bandwidth, energy to do it. So have really like almost kind of doubled back on what our initial kind of model was.
You know, that's interesting. I know you work with a lot of brands, and you know, I always hear brands talk about the concept of ownership. Like, we want to own this space, and you know, usually they have a fuzzy definition of what that means. But I think you just really illustrated it, right? Is that like you can play in all these different areas, but what's the thing that your audience really comes to you for and thinks about you? And that's sometimes hard to cope with, because you know you want to you want to do everything.
I know,
you know,
and it's
especially when one thing's working. But I think it kind of goes back to what you said at the beginning with the hot sauce. Is like, stay in your lane. Yeah,
that's interesting. I never even thought about that, but yeah, it definitely does. I think those were some just fail, like, you know, that those were like minor, I think not huge economic investments, but time, resource, energy, that was not the right direction for the business. And I think when you are growing that fast, you just kind of, again, it's like trying to like grasp everything you can when you're growing.
Of course.
But yeah, I still like I think every year like there's this new excitement in the business of like new opportunities. Like we really do. I mean, we are a young company, and we feel like we've really only just begun to kind of build what we could and should be doing. Because the music business just changed so fast. Like with technology and everything, like it really does feel completely fresh. When I started doing this, like MySpace was our number one marketing platform, right? Like it is new every year.
Yeah.
Like streaming wasn't big 2-3 years ago. Like now it's like, I think for the first time ever topped like digital downloads in terms of revenue, and new exciting stuff like VR. Like how can A3C kind of continue to be like speak and be leaders in these spaces? I think is what interests me now.
So what's the next big goal? Where do you see it going?
Yeah. So I think the conference is something that we want to continue to grow out in tracks and experiences. And there's two things there that we're doing this year, and we're expanding out of our one facility and growing into 2 other facilities. One is kind of not a pet project, but something we've been doing for the last 2 years, which is called A3C Action. And for the longest time, after like 8 or 9 years of doing A3C, we were kind of like, what do we do for the community? Like, what do we actually do? Like,
sure,
this event is for the community for sure, but how are we being proactive in terms of making a difference? So we launched A3C Action, which was basically like a request for proposals for ideas and nonprofits that were using hip hop specifically, or music or culture or art for civic engagement or social justice. And it was cool. Like we launched it 2 years ago, not really knowing what was going to happen. Year 2, we gave away $10,000. We fly 5 people in. We put them through 2-3 days of business pitch training, and then they pitch kind of Shark Tank style in front of some judges.
Yeah.
This year, we're launching an actual seminar, so or a summit, if you will. So like consumer-facing programming over 2 days at the Auburn Research Library, which is right next door to our conference center. And they're going to host workshops and panels and keynote conversations and meetups and all these things that have to do with, like, I guess, bringing the creatives, the activists, the academics, and nonprofits all under one roof. And just saying, hey, listen, we are all passionate about this culture and making our communities better. Like, let's get this together. Like, you guys should all know each other. So that's one big initiative that we're launching this year. Another is we really want to build and develop a creator complex. So if the foundation of almost every conference is networking and learning, one thing we think is missing, I think is missing, is creation. Like, and we say come to Atlanta to create,
right?
But how are we being proactive in that space? Like, so we're partnering with GSU to take over a new complex they're finishing in April. And we want to take over 3 floors of this new complex. And they have recording studios. It's actually the Creative Media Industries Institute.
Nice.
So they have VR facilities, recording facilities, screening rooms. And our goal is to program 2 days of just like maker spaces. So the idea is like a creative can come in there, like get their website built or started, like get headshots, work on their EP, record a song, master or mix a song, get direct feedback, but like really tangible. Like producers can meet artists and artists can hear producers' music and they can link right then and there. We'll get new software and technology in the spaces where people can like play with it, like what new hardware is coming out that people can play with it and make new music. Because we feel like if the proposition to a new artist is like, come to A3C to network and learn, it's tough. Like a lot of up-and-coming artists, like when I talk to folks and my friends, it's like, what's most important to you, like to develop your career? A lot of times it's like, I need a beat from someone, or I want to collaborate with someone. Like that's, and even when I was managing an artist, I was like, the best thing for your career is going to be getting a dope beat from a producer, or a really good collaboration. And that's going to do more for your career than I think anything else at that point. So even like inviting some of the best folks in the country to come in and like lend their time and energy and be, in music and asking some folks to give away, verses or just like lend their time and like, that's going to be, if we can, like, again, like this is like, we're in conceptual phase right now. Mm-hmm. So if we can build this, and again, it's going to be year one, so it's going to kind of be a beta test of it. So we'll probably not do everything we want to do.
Yeah.
But what does that kind of entry level stuff look like? Because what we want to basically say is like, if we can get numbers that come out of that, we're like, hey, like 10 albums were mixed and 100 new collaborations and 20 new music videos were shot, and like all these kind of crazy things that can kind of just come out of a complex would be, I think, really exciting and on to something new.
So how do you, if a lot of people, I think, like to say that South by Southwest sort of like jumped the shark. I think their numbers are bigger every year. I don't.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, well.
I don't know.
Depending on what metrics,
I don't
right?
follow their numbers.
Yeah.
but like on the surface, I think they're doing fine. But it's kind of popular to be like, those guys, it's whatever. Coachella, I've been hearing people tell me for 10 years that Coachella is like, this is the worst lineup ever. And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And so I don't know if, I always, like, I think you kind of can't take that stuff too seriously.
And some of it is just jaded people. Like, I realize, like, the older we get, the more jaded our friends are.
For sure. No, there's that, like, everybody wants to celebrate the old days because we forget how shitty it was.
For sure.
But, like, but is that something you guys are conscious of? Like, how do you keep, keeping things fresh?
100%.
And, I guess, let me ask it this way, is how will you know when it's time to move on?
It's tough, man. I think keeping it fresh for us is the open platform. The fact that 5 people are not in a room programming this and hoping people like it, the fact our job really is to get the young and up and coming people excited about coming here and helping them come here.
Yeah.
So we think like one thing that's going to keep us kind of relevant and relevant and at least a platform for a hip hop community is doing just that, being a platform for the community. Not necessarily like we think hip hop's going this way or we support this type of music or this is like what you're going to hear this year, but like really actually being like, this is like where we, here's music from LA and here's music from San Francisco and here's a new movement coming out of the UK and, here's a new kind of like rap battles or kind of, like these incorporating these different elements of hip hop.
Yeah.
We've had that patchwork mentality from day one.
Yeah.
And that definitely comes from like, I've always been mad inclusive, and I'm definitely not like, a red velvet rope type guy. Like I like grimy stuff, and I've kind of always felt like this, inclusion is A1, and that's also so hip hop to me. Like, like when you can get dope people to collaborate, that's,
Sure.
It just.
How do you, I'm fascinated with movements and how they get started. And I think, it's so interesting. If we go back to what we were talking about earlier, that first Outkast album came out, I think it was 93, 94.
94, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, that was a big record for us.
Yeah.
But most people never heard of. Most of the people that know Outkast today didn't hear of Outkast for 10 years.
Yeah.
And that Dirty South movement didn't manifest for probably close to 10 years.
For
right?
sure.
Or not in...
and slowly.
Yeah.
And kind of fused. But is that part of the overnight success takes time?
Well, that's what I wonder. That's what I'm curious about is now that we have the internet and social media and all that, and culture seems to be moving so much faster. And so I'm wondering, like, when you see these things happen or you curate something that's brand new, like, does that feel different the way that it spreads then afterwards?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, you hit the nail on the head in terms of culture, like how rapidly things move and change. Like, I think if you were looking at wavelengths, like there would be sounds that would take over and kind of like come in and out of style.
Mm-hmm.
It could last 5-10 years, at least elements of them. Nowadays, you can see stuff become hot and not in 3 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. It's wild. Like how quickly stuff changes, how the democratization of power, how like decision makers and how there are so many more of them.
Yeah,
I think, and influencers and folks that really do like impact and move. There are still definitely folks that like turn faucets and and make things move and are more seismic shifts. But there are a lot of people that, and I think for the most part, those people are the ones that are like starting the cracks, and then someone comes in and says, "Oh, that's dope. Let me pour the fuel on that fire," or whatever the analogy you want. But it is interesting, and I think it's tough for anyone that works in the culture. And I say it's tough to book a festival 6 months out. I mean, in hip hop.
Sure.
And I think you spoke to this earlier. It's hard for hip hop to have these big events. Like you saw Rock the Bells kind of end a few years ago. And I think part of it is like there's some serious divides in hip hop. There's old school versus new school. There's coasts. It's not where I don't think that's in music as much. Obviously, there's like age is one thing, but
sure.
I think in hip hop there's much more like this is the type of music I fuck with. I don't fuck with that type of music.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was talking to somebody about this the other day that like, when I was coming up as a hip hop fan, like we basically listened to everything that came out. I mean, maybe there's like, not in New York, they didn't like anything from the West Coast, and like, I'm from the Bay, so like a lot of, we had a whole thing that
no one else had.
So there were certain regional divides, but what I would call mainstream hip hop is which was like the major kind of hip hop labels that whether it was Def Jam or Jive or Cold Chillin' or Wild Pitch or those, right? Like if you're a hip hop fan, you probably like a lot of hip hop fans listen to every record that came out.
Yeah.
And you kind of liked it, and some of them you loved to death. But there wasn't that much of like, this is garbage. I'm not fucking with that at all.
Yeah.
Right. And now, like, part of it is there's just so much more music, but I think part of it is also that there's these factions, these beefs, these like all of these different allegiances, whether it's geographic or cruise or whatever.
I think the music's also and again, like, I hate making broad statements because I'm oftentimes like, if you want to spend time thinking about it, it's like you can always like talk myself out of anything.
No, we're just going to say this is right.
Yeah, okay. So I think it's interesting because I also, to your point, so much more music.
Yeah.
Like hip hop has matured so much that the sounds are all over the place.
Right.
Like even like brushing something with the hip hop brush is tough. Like things like Bryson Tiller and Anderson .Paak and even like Janelle Monáe's and like these amazingly like eclectic musicians, Janae Aiko, like where's the hip hop start and end? And I guess 10, 20 years ago, it was pretty damn easy. Like, we know, like that's hip hop.
It was. I would, although back then it was a thing of like, so I was on the Grammy nominating committee for the rap category for like best rap. I forget. It was kind of at the beginning of that category.
Yeah.
And our job, we would meet meet over a long lunch, and they would play records that labels had proposed for that category, and we had to decide, first of all, is this a rap record? And so we'd have these debates about, there's a chick singing on it, so no or yes, or like I forget what the record was that year, but it was like Snap. The Power or something. It was like, do we want this in the rap category, or do we try to make someone else take it, whatever? And so there's always been some of that.
That's a good point.
But I think it was a lot narrower. I mean, obviously there weren't that many records then. It was like it was a whole different type of challenge. But I can't imagine doing that today.
And now,
like, I used to organize my records by genre.
Yeah.
And like I realized you can't do that anymore.
I did the exact same thing. I went from like blues to soul to
Right.
R&B to hip hop and then like rock. I did the exact same thing you just did.
Yeah.
I had like shelves when I
Yeah.
started with like
For sure.
just
But
blues
you
music.
can't, that doesn't work anymore.
No, it'd be tough.
Not in any meaningful way.
I mean, they, you know, not even like the distribution has changed. Like they're just like announced last week that like SoundCloud in 2018 is going to be nominated for Grammys.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
to your point earlier, and I think it just goes back to this, like there's just so much more music.
Yeah.
Like if you show a graph, that's really like the biggest difference between any period in the past and an internet era
Yeah.
is the quantity.
Yeah.
Like the quantity is so much higher, like magnitudes of hundreds higher.
I mean, I remember in the 90s seeing something, I think in Billboard, that said like 28,000 albums released this year. And I thought like, that is a staggering number. Like, how is that even possible?
Yes.
That was in the 90s. It has to be like 500,000 now or more, or
Dude,
millions.
And where you even call it an album, right? Because
well,
like
there's that.
like joke
sure.
like, and that's the funny part because, yeah, definitely. I mean, like
I mean, it's got to be millions of
it would be
releases,
that it would be
whatever.
that
Yeah,
in a day
for sure.
because of just like around the country hip hop mixtapes that drop every day.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
For sure. Or EPs or mixtapes or out. You know, like
Right.
just if you just kind of continue to go down the whole of like
Yeah.
my homie's cousin who, you know,
Right,
put it
right,
up
of
on
course.
like a website I've never heard of.
For
Like
sure. Yeah, the Vine tracks and
Yes.
all that. So, shift gears for a second.
Cool.
Because I know that you guys, in addition to the conference and the festival, you do a lot of work with brands, and that's a big part of your business. What brands are doing it right as it relates to you guys and hip hop more generally?
Yeah. Not a sponsor of us this year, but I've always looked at Red Bull as someone who is always done culture, whatever culture they're in, really, really genuinely well.
Yeah.
They have great brand leaders, but they also like, I don't ever see them stumble that much in hip hop. Like they empower the right people. They produce content at a high level.
Yeah.
And I guess part of it is just like, you know, their ROI is not as important. It's really, they are a cultural brand.
Their former CEO told me once that you can't do good marketing when your first concern is ROI.
I think that hits the nail on the head, right? Like end of conversation. Yeah. And it's about building relationships with people. And they luckily started with like a deeper pocket than everyone.
Yep. Sure.
I think, I think even Adidas does it. You know, like I think there's examples of Adidas, Converse, and Pumas doing things really well. They're super brand conscious. They have great influencers and they have great brands in the culture, so they're always able to do some pretty cool stuff.
So what is it that like when a brand comes to you or like, and they kind of have it wrong, like what is it that they need to learn from you?
I think sometimes we kind of give them like, here's why this is gonna fail, more than anything. Like oftentimes it's like, here's an idea we want to do, and I think for the most part it's like one or two misconceptions of like, hey, we want to do a freestyle competition where people are rapping over other people's beats or something, or like, and then we'll be like, well, up and coming artists don't want that, right?
Right.
They want to produce, they want to promote their song, and they're trying to build their, like, so it's on certain levels. There's just like a one or two education levels that we'll have to take someone. It's like, well,
so it's kind of not being in sync with the culture.
100%, and trying to fit but this idea is fully formed and we're ready to go with it.
Right.
And it's like, that's great, but it's gonna fail. Yeah. Like you're not gonna have the impact you want.
That's good.
And sometimes they'll be like, well, this is our second year doing it, and it's like, well, show me what the first year looked like. And so we've had a couple conversations like that where we try to steer them in the right direction. Other ones is just like trying to reach certain, like when they're super age specific, it's tough. Like when when a brand is trying to reach teens, it's really hard in hip hop, like to do it authentically. I think a brand that's been doing a lot. And if you've been on the internet or anywhere else recently, Fresh Empire has been doing a ton in hip hop.
Yeah.
And I think they're kind of handcuffed creatively on what they can do because all the artists, and the same for liquor brands and any brands that's age or specific, it's tough because hip hop is not it's an age fluid thing. I mean, if you tell an artist that they can't cuss, they can't rap about X, Y, and Z, and their audience needs to be 16 to 13, it's like, okay, let's see where this goes. Yeah. And we've run into a kind of some roadblocks there as well. Sure. When we're really pretty adamant about not censoring artists, and kind of even on cuss words, we're like, well, here's what we can and cannot do. Like I can't, if an artist's performing their song or even like just freestyling something, like I'm pretty adamant about like, here's what I can tell them, but what happens. Yeah.
What are the biggest sacrifices that you've made that you didn't necessarily expect when you were getting into this business?
Yeah, going back to that, like, I mean, like personally, or even like business-wise, personally. Yeah, time. I mean, this is like a labor of love, man. I've thrown myself in this fully. When I gave up everything else I was doing, managing artists and all that stuff, that was a big commitment for me.
Have there been times when you sort of question the mission?
Yeah, I get burnt out, man. I mean, I think when you're anyone that works on a seasonal business, there is a pretty, like, my body in November, and mentally, I'm burnt out because I just ran a sprint, from July through October, and I, and then we really do leave it all on the floor, on Sunday. Our team's kind of running on adrenaline, and we usually do something big for the team on Monday, and then we're like following up with partners, and then we're kind of like, oh my God, like, so we it's funny because every year we come out feeling really good, but then there's this natural, like, I'm completely burnt out. So every year, November, December is a reset button for me, recharge the batteries.
That's kind of cool in a way, though.
It is, man. I love that in the sense, but it's also like clear the whiteboard, throw up ideas. What do we like? What do we see? What's fun happening out there? Like, what's some crazy stuff we could do this year? And then let's see if our partners or people can help us produce it. Like, that's the fun time of year too. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Even this month and really through March, we kind of use South by Southwest as like when we kind of launch a lot of stuff. I think the industry and a lot of folks are really focused. It's my baby and I'm thinking about it all year long, but I have to understand, like, this is, not everyone else is thinking about this year long. Like, work on everyone else's cycle. So between now and really, mid-March, late March, we're in ideation stages. We're kind of building concepts. We're very fluid, and then we kind of start executing. We're still kind of keep ourselves, scalable. We can kind of continue to build new stuff. But March is, end of March, April is when we kind of just like, okay, now here's the plan. Let's execute.
Okay, I have a little speed round that we like to do before we wrap it up. So if we can go back to you when you're 18, and give yourself one piece of advice.
Oh man, one piece. I was gonna think of something funny, but then I was like, don't date Sarah. That girl's horrible.
Sarah listens to the show. What's up, Sarah? Shout out to Sarah.
Terrible human.
Why you do my man wrong like that?
Waste of time.
Hate you, Sarah.
I would say take more, like, write more. Yeah, like I think you can get a lot done when you write and take solid notes.
Nice. That's a good one.
I always hate looking back and being like, I remember thinking, like, I had a thought and then I was like, what the hell was it? So I've been a much better note taker in the last couple of years.
Man, I take notes religiously.
Yeah.
And half time I look back, I'm like, I don't know what that refers to,
man.
It's just like it's just a phrase. And I'm like,
So take better notes.
Yeah,
that would
I
be
need
it.
that one for sure.
Because put full thoughts down. And it's fun to even look back sometimes and be like, oh, that was a funny ass idea, or like that was a great idea. Like I wonder if I'll ever have time for that.
Is there a talent that you always wish you had more of?
Man, I wish I was in the NBA, but
What would you play?
point guard, man.
Okay.
So I love basketball, man.
Yeah.
And I have bad knees. I was a gym rat in college.
Oh, wow.
I was playing 3-4 times a week, and just like blew out. Like I had a torn meniscus and continue to have like knee problems. But I love that sport, man.
So I know you said you couldn't see yourself on a different path besides entrepreneurship, but if you were going to choose a career outside of music,
Yeah. Honestly, I also love to travel. Mm-hmm. So I think if I could do something that was either like, and this is going to sound like kind of corny, but like even a travel blogger or travel writer, right? Like, I know, like, I was going to say, like,
that'd be a dope job if it paid anything.
It doesn't pay anything, but I also like,
that'd be great.
Yeah, like, or started like a travel business, like experiences in other places.
What's your favorite place you've ever been to?
I just got back from Colombia, but man, I'm very fortunate. I've traveled a lot, and there isn't a, like, like when I was 14, I went to Alaska with my dad. One of the most magical trips I've ever had. I've been to India, and which is, I think, the most different place I've ever, like, India was like, oh my God, like, this is great. Like, this is so different. Vietnam and France and Italy and Spain. And,
nice.
But I just got back from Colombia, and I think South American culture is amazingly bright, and I almost feel like I should be like, from the food and the music and the salsa dancing. I also love to dance. Like, there's a lot of stuff I really dig with South American culture. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, mine, I love to travel too, and I'm telling everybody who hasn't already, go to Cuba.
Cuba, yeah.
Before.
I know, like tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's
there's a time.
The wheels turn slowly.
So when did you go?
I went in. When did I go? 2010.
All right.
And so it's but you need to go see, because like you said, it's like the most different place.
Yeah.
Like it's.
So that was kind of my experience in Colombia, which is like, it's a really new tourist market.
Yeah.
Like everywhere I went, there were not tourists. Like locals were like, on the beaches, and locals were at the restaurants, and I was like, this is dope. Like I'm not like, like going through like an amusement park of a country. I'm like literally like seeing and eating at places where the locals do, and they're so excited.
Turns out that when really bad shit happens, it makes it a great place to travel to.
It is the one. So it is the silver lining.
Like my mom went to Eastern Europe like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Poland and all these, and she's just like, everything's brand new and it's amazing, and it's like, So
they were kind of like, oh wow, you're here.
Pro war.
Like the locals were like, oh wow, like, what are you doing here? Like,
right. So if I worked at A3C, what's something I would hear you say over and over?
We're a Hubspot company.
Okay.
Do you know what Hubspot is?
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen at Hubspot, it doesn't happen.
Nice.
So I think when you manage a virtual company and you start growing in scale, like having processes in place is like A1 important. So like if someone tells me, yo, I just had a conversation with X, Y, and Z, or I'm talking to a new brand, and that doesn't live in our CRM, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's good.
So those
good
things
advice.
I think are really important. And I think because I just remember the days before that when we were a spreadsheet company.
Sure.
And just like, guys, we have these tools for a reason. If we don't use them, they're not worthwhile.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
Yeah.
Who would you be most excited to learn as a fan of A3C?
Man, good question. Because this is an experience I continue to have over and over again. That is like the most flattering thing ever. Like getting texts from people that come and perform.
What's been the biggest one then? That like the one that's been the most.
I think one of the most genuine and just like heartfelt like hugs was just like De La Soul. Just like a group I like had on repeat. And we had De La Soul days. So we really kind of went out for them, and it was after they did the the big raise on Kickstarter, and we actually played a role in that. And then
nice.
But like, 2 Chainz has been unbelievably supportive, and Diddy and a bunch of people. So I honestly think, just again, like selfishly, like if Andre 3000 came out and showed love and was also like, I love what y'all do for the city, that would mean a lot.
Nice.
Yeah.
What, do you collect anything?
No. I used to as a kid, and I realized I'm not a kid anymore. So I'm like, I
What did you collect?
I like baseball cards, like, a lot of things. But I honestly, like, I've lost, like, collections before. And I honestly, like, as I grow up, like, I really want to become less materialistic. And I think even working hip-hop, like, I have a fine balance between, like, I don't want to get addicted to sneakers. Right. I don't want to get addicted to fashion.
For sure.
Like, I think if you want to collect anything, collect friends, man. Like, have a great dinner with someone, like, and that's some cheesy shit, but I really try not to get it like too materialistic, because I'm very against, like, even if it's knickknacks, man. Like, where am I gonna put all this shit?
For me, I'm not really a collector, but I've like had shit and lost it, and realized I don't care. Like, once it's gone, like, I'm like, whatever. I shouldn't have got it in the first place.
I've lost stuff that I love, and I literally the next day I'm like, I'll find something else I love.
Fuck it.
But one thing and then on the flip side of that is art. I love local, like, that's pop artists, street artists, because I feel like twofold. I'm supporting an artist who I love and who's making a handcrafted one-of-one piece that won't be recreated, that I can display on my wall and like look at forever. And they are next door neighbors, and so I love collecting local artists' works. And every time I'm go to a gallery or something, I'll try to pick something out and just pick it up.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's worth collecting.
Yeah. And I don't even know it's collecting, because I feel like I'm giving them something. But
what's the last great book you read?
So I don't read books.
Okay.
Like,
no judgment.
No, like I got into podcasts. I read magazines a lot. I read a lot of articles.
What's your favorite podcast?
I listen to a lot, man. I listen to Freakonomics. I listen to TED Talks. I listen to How I Built This. I listen to a lot of like businessy / kind of, they're inspiring to me.
Yeah.
Serial and
Any great cultural podcasts, hip hop podcasts?
So I listen to Combat Jack Show.
Yeah.
Again, we built with them. They've been the last 5 years. So that's the one I listen to the most.
Yeah.
But no, man. I think for the most part, like I also used to live on blogs, like for hip hop. I used to like spend way too much time. And again, I realized like I need to focus on big picture stuff and then empower people that can do that.
Sure.
So to the extent I've also tried to listen, but I try to try to stay worldly, man. I read The Economist. I read like what's happening in the world. Like,
nice.
I read a lot of like New York Times, whatever, dude. I'm as much as I am a part of the hip hop culture and active in it, like I really try to make sure that I'm not head down and like,
sure, yeah, you guys
know
take
what's
it out
happening.
sometimes.
Yeah,
sure.
man.
What movie do you think you've seen the most?
Movie have I seen the most?
Yeah.
So if White Man Can't Jump's on TV, I'm watching that. But if Shawshank's on TV one more time, I swear to God. But White Man Can't Jump is a movie I could watch just on loop for the rest of my life.
I haven't seen that in like 10 years.
Dude, you're missing out. Or Dumb and Dumber.
No, I'm waiting for my son to be old enough we can watch that together.
Dude, it's
coming.
I heard Blake Griffin's going to remake this. Oh, shit. And on PTI. And PTI is like, let it breathe a little bit longer. Like, it still feels really fresh.
A lot of people didn't see it. So, I mean, no,
then
it
go
wasn't
see
like the
it.
biggest movie.
Then go see it.
Yeah, I get you.
Dude, I had a VHS of it. When my VHS stopped working, I had a DVD of it.
Yeah.
And like, just because like I've been called Billy Ho before. Like, I've definitely been like the white goofy kid, and not as goofy, but and like all black course. I've played in Venice Beach. I've played in The Cage. I've and like I just think that movie is just perfect from front to back, man.
Okay.
It's hilarious.
Nice. In your opinion, who's the best DJ of all time?
Oh man, good question. DJ of all time. Now, so like party rocker, skill level.
Just somebody that you've seen.
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So, one of the best DJs I've seen, and I was, right time, right place, but DJ Clever, man, from Atlanta.
Okay.
In terms of like scratching ability, mixing, party rocker, variety of music, like I've been to a bunch of parties he's been at, and like I feel like every time I've left, been like, this dude is on another level. But then I know that, like we also had like Beat Junkies out to A3C this year, and like I just like was like my jaw was on the ground. But I also know that like that's also a community that was like the deeper you dive, the more you're like, oh my God,
For
like
sure.
there's so much talent out there.
Yeah, it keeps getting better and better.
It's wild, man.
Yeah.
So I actually like every time I leave a party with like a real ass DJ, I'm always like, I need to do that more often. It's
Go to the party, not
like I need to go to like
Same
just
here.
a really dope
for sure.
DJ party sometimes. Yeah, it's freshening.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
What about you? I gotta ask you that.
Oh, I mean, it's always Jazzy Jeff.
Yeah. Who I saw at NAMM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff's always incredible. Z-Treb.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the Beat Junkies. To me, like a guy out here, Adam 12,
Yeah.
who I
don't know
should have
him.
told you to go see on Saturday night, but I forgot.
No, it's all good.
But,
Another time.
incredible. He was. I think he's still gonna be Obama's DJ.
Oh wow.
If Obama does any parties anymore. or
Yeah, he
whatever.
better, man. Started Obama Entertainment.
But he's one of like kind of local
Cool.
cat that just always
Yeah.
does it right.
Nice.
Um,
So I've never like I would have said Jeff, but I've just never been to like I've never been fortunate enough to be at a party.
Oh,
I see his sets online and stuff, and I'm like, okay, this dude's real. But I wouldn't feel right if I said his name without actually being at a party he
enough.
rocked.
fair enough.
Yeah.
But I love DJs. Period that take their craft seriously.
Yeah. Something we want to do more of at A3C for sure.
Yeah.
We got a concept that I won't break right now, but
Nice. Can't wait to hear.
yeah, man.
Cool,
I'll tell you offline.
Well, yeah, we'll be watching. Where does everybody find the festival online?
A3CFestival.com. Obviously on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Follow us. And then we'll be announcing our dates in February. So stay tuned for our dates. And then slowly after that, we'll announce ticket sales and artist submissions. And we start rolling out. So like people start hitting us up online for our dates and stuff and everything. Just kind of like keep checking back. And
Dope.
we'll do an email blast and get stuff out there. So
Cool.
And then I also tell people like our online forums in terms of partnerships and info are on our website. So if people do want to get involved, we're always looking. Like we put up speaker submissions and artist submissions and partnership submissions.
Nice.
So we try to involve as many people. So if anyone's listening and they're like, man, how do I get involved? It's like, what do you do? And like, give us as much information as you can.
Dope.
And let's figure something out.
All right. Get out there.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate all the
Right
good
on.
stories.
Thanks for having me, man.
Dope. All right, thanks for joining us. That was Mike Walbert. Check out the A3C Festival online or make your way to Atlanta to check it out in person. Hey, leave us a review on iTunes, 5 stars, of course. Hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube at Rebel Radio Net. And most importantly, come back next week for more Rebel Radio. My guest will be Big Pooh from formerly of Little Brother. He's got some great stories for you on Rebel Radio. Peace.